One story starts, a bit poetically, on the central coast of California. A kid named Al Santos has a plan in life. Not so much a plan, but a determination to not be a rain cloud. That is, working hard, long, and wet on the fishing docks of sardine territory. So, he found a way out. He took a gig as a golf caddy, something he'd toyed with before at a new course in the area. Having just opened a few years prior, Al Santos proudly made 35 cents a loop caddying on the Pebble Beach golf links. One lucky day, Santos was given a Morgan silver dollar by a golfer as a tip. He never spent the coin, rubbing it for good luck and keeping it in his pocket for decades as a principle of wealth. You can't ever be poor with a silver dollar in your pocket. Decades ticked through the clock. Not long before Al Santos passed away, he handed down the silver dollar, a unique item that possesses both literal and sentimental value, to his grandson, Philip. The kid took it and tried his best to wrap his mind around just how sacred the piece of metal is. Some 15 years later, Philip will squat down slightly and place that silver dollar on the smooth grass beneath his feet, swapping it for a bumpy white ball that he puts in his pocket. He stays squatted for an extra second. Maybe he's getting a read of the green. It was but 4 minutes ago that he stared down this very flag from 138 yards out and stuck a brilliant approach shot to 7 feet. Maybe Philip is just taken in the moment. It's 2019 now. 11 days from today will be the 100-year anniversary of the golf course at Pebble Beach opening up. A place that literally goes back generations in this family. The moment a century-long story lived out and respected in mere seconds ends. He stands back up and prepares to putt for birdie. He doesn't go by Philip anymore, except to mom and dad and maybe some cheesy hecklers along the course. It's been shortened to Phil, and the family name made its way to Mickelson. So, right now, on this golf course in Pebble Beach, using his grandfather's prized silver dollar as his ball marker, Phil Mickelson steps up to putt. When he hits it, he'll make it, cashing a birdie on 18. There won't be much pressure, which may or may not change the outcome of Phil. When he hits it, near on Sunday afternoon, it will end the AT&T Pro-Am tournament. Phil will win it comfortably by 3 strokes. When he hits it, it'll be the first time in his career that he wins this tournament, doing it right here at Pebble Beach. His grandfather, Al Santos, will still be around to see his flesh and blood parade on his old stomping grounds. It's family business. Oh, of course, when he hits it, he's gonna be doing it from the wrong side of the ball. Another story begins sometime around the creation of the sport we call baseball. It didn't take long. It was still the 1800s. The game had hardly stretched its legs, but diamonds have always been sharp. The same is true for those who play on them. Baseball's first minds were able to quickly notice a natural quirk of the sport, an inherent bias towards a minority hidden in plain sight and begging to be abused. They say to never bite the hand that feeds you, but as humans, we have consistently bit one of our only two. Man has a complicated history with the left hand, and to be transparent, we still don't really fully understand what is referred to as handedness. As far back as we can tell, which is at least 500,000 years, there have been left-handed humans. Never has it been recorded as a common trait. Again, from what we can see, it's always sat at around 10 to 15% of the population, naturally favoring their left side. But over time, it stopped being a simple issue of preference and became just an issue. Humans naturally dislike change, so we are naturally going to be against anything that is different from most of us. Left-handers have been genuinely discriminated against to heavily varying levels across the scroll of history. It was kind of an evil, sinister thing to be left-handed, and I say that so literally because the word sinister originally just meant to the left side, and it's now a synonym for like ominous and menacing. More examples are endless. In Christianity, the right hand of God is a commonly used phrase, and the favored hand, while his left is the hand of judgment. Due to perceptions of bad luck and evilness associated with it, many cultures have been known to force upon students the use of their right hand. In the worst of cases, by literally tying a child's left arm behind their back so they can't learn to write with it. This specific practice has been directly linked to development issues, including dyslexia and stuttering. Even King George VI, the British ruler, famously was forced out of using his naturally preferred Southpaw. With him, his stutter when publicly speaking was well known and documented. And on the British path, this is a whole nother realm. The nicknames we call lefties. A fair disclaimer for how European this is about to sound. Cack-handed, mollyduker, cuddy-wifter. Okay, no, we are done. Those are not words. Later evolutions in industry and technology proved to further benefit the right hand. Everyday items like scissors, ink pens, sporting equipment, and even heavy machinery is often built specifically for right-handed use, and acquiring a mirrored version of the product can be anywhere from annoying to impossible. This often led to lefties having a natural disadvantage in the workforce and thus being seen as more clumsy or incompetent. I myself am guilty. I made a discriminatory joke. He's gonna be doing it from the wrong side of the ball.
From the wrong side of the ball. From the wrong side of the ball.
What's so wrong about the left hand? I bet a lot of you laughed at it. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Wikipedia's broad page on discrimination lists anti-left-handedness as its own section. They get themselves into another controversy by deciding to put it under a social discrimination rather than attributes. This is a debate still being had today because truthfully we aren't sure how much of a factor, if any, genetics do play in a person's handedness. In other words, we don't know if left-handed people are born that way or if it develops over early childhood. But through a minuscule portion of human history, just the last 150 years or so, lefties have rejoiced in the one thing that gives them power, the thing they can undeniably, unarguably say they are more valuable than righties at: baseball. Around 10% of people are left-handed. Over 25% of Major League Baseball players are left-handed. 61 pitchers are in MLB's Hall of Fame. 13 of them are left-handed, good for 21% or double the national average. These are what we would call higher than expected numbers, just based on the human average, and they're not even as crazy as this one. Of the 128 batters in the Hall, a staggering 59 hit left-handed, with just 61 on the right side and a few switch hitters. That is 46%. Way too high to possibly be naturally occurring. And it's not natural, it is the opposite. Baseball goes out of its way to target and sort of breed left-handed human beings. Why is this? Why is baseball dominated by the lefty? What is it exactly that gives them, wait for it, it'll be worth it, the upper hand? On the other hand, though, well, same hand, different story. Phil Mickelson hits a shot in his backyard. Then he hits another, and another. He's young right now. He won't always be. Between the years of 1997 and 2009, golf had a renaissance. There were 83 total players in this period who played at least 75 rounds in majors. Here's a few of the best ones. At the bottom of this list is Steve Flesch with an extremely impressive 119 over par across a decade on some of the toughest courses out there. He barely trails Ernie Els by just a stroke. But above both of them, and a whole lot of other guys, the grandson of Al Santos, one Philip Alfred Mickelson. He doesn't just have these two all-time pros beat, he kinda kills them. Phil has mind-blowingly stayed in the double digits. His cumulative score sits at 99 over, a cozy cushion between him and Ernie. He keeps hitting balls, focusing on sweeping over the very same spot on the grass over and over again. It's a golf kid's dream yard. You can call Phil 12 years old here. You can call him 9, 6, 17 would work, but don't go too far past there because he's gonna leave home someday. He hits another few balls. He starts getting bored with the basic little chip shot he's trying to roll onto the green. The work ethic the kid has is something unnatural and unteachable. You could argue that his swing is unnatural too. Phil Mickelson is right-handed. He learned to write and still does with his right hand. If he had a basketball jump shot, it would look normal. His famous golf swing, which would lead to his nickname of Lefty and him becoming one of the most famous for being left-handed people of all time, has a funny backstory. As a youngster, before he was even really able to hold a golf club or swing it right, Phil would watch his father, also a golf-obsessed man, practice his own swing. When it wasn't the backyard tiny course, it was the all-American dad setup of hitting a driver into a net in the garage. Young Phil would sit mesmerized and watch his father. Then he would stand across from him and mimic the swing exactly as he saw it. Like a mirror does, Phil was completely flipped 180 degrees, and thus from a young age, he solely practiced a left-handed golf swing. It's a silly origin story for something that would go on to become such a large part of Phil's career, and without a weird set of circumstances, everything could have been different. Phil is getting restless. He holds a few chips in a row before getting more creative with it. He tries using a steep fringe hill that feeds onto the green to guide his ball down. There's not a lot of role models out there for Phil, guys who swing a club the way he does. At this point, just one major in the entire 100-year-plus history of golf has ever been won by a left-hander. That was New Zealander Bob Charles, or respectfully speaking, Sir Robert Charles, who had some insanely impressive longevity to his career. But that 1963 Open was the entirety of lefty dominance in golf. It's all Phil had to look up to. Analyzing the differences between a left and right-handed swing in golf can help us understand why this is. Even if just 10% of the world are Southpaws, this is a way smaller than expected amount of lefty winners, like less than 1%. It makes it seem like it's sort of the opposite of baseball, like swinging lefty in golf is a literal disadvantage. But it's really not. The sort of natural on-course advantages between the two hands kind of balance each other out. Like for Phil, if he's trying to hit this shot right here with his ball laying right against a tree, he can basically take a normal swing at it. A right-hander would have their stance completely thrown off and messed up. But these type of weird lies mostly cancel each other out. There does actually exist switch hitters in the sport of golf, though it's very rare, and normally people stay hitting from one side of the ball for an entire 18-hole round. They're not switching back and forth in the middle. The real reason for the underrepresentation of lefties in golf simply traces back to social factors. For one, with no clear advantage offered, many parents who start training their kids young will naturally teach them a right-handed golf swing to start, even if the child hasn't shown any preference yet. Phil likely would have been taught like this if he didn't go out of his way to mirror his father. So what really screws a lot of lefty golfers is getting some actual clubs they can play with. A sort of staple of the sport of golf is hitting the course with your dad or grandfather's old clubs that have been collecting dust in the garage for years, but if you're lefty, odds are you can't play with most clubs you just find laying around, which likely encouraged a lot of golf-loving kids to force themselves to hit right-handed. Phil has left the known world rather quickly. He is attempting to perfect an alien-looking shot, where he swings with true power and force, only to send the ball rocketing, like, straight up in the air. When it lands, ideally on the green, all the ball's momentum is just going straight down, and it won't roll much further. Just for fun, he starts going out of his way to try and hit the shot over various tall objects. I'm excited to tell the story of both a life and a career, and it's truly important to me that I do both of those things distinguishably. Phil Mickelson is one of the most fascinating case studies of being a human in the sports world. He's a consummate professional and degenerate gambler. He's a shit talker with the yips, a cocky and arrogant family man. He's an all-time great, but never the best, a master of control and technique who cannot stop himself from going for broke. Asking someone to describe Phil in one word, well, it's unfair, because they could use any of those things I just said and they'd be right. He's not as simple as a good guy or a bad guy, a hero or a villain. He's a human. He does good things and he has flaws, public, noticeable flaws that are sometimes easy to see. For someone in the spotlight, people don't always love that human aspect of things. There is a genuine argument to be made that the greatest athletes in 3 out of the 4 major American sports played left-handed. It's not the most popular argument in basketball, but Southpaw Bill Russell has an on-paper case like no one else. It's a pretty easy one in the sport of hockey, as the great one, Wayne Gretzky, not only shot from the left side of his body, but was a natural left-hander. The sport of hockey, however, is a bit of a unique case, which we'll touch on. And baseball, well, of course, you get to take your pick. Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, Barry Bonds, Sandy Koufax, Randy Johnson, Ichiro Suzuki, Tony Gwynn, from left-handed hitters to batters and even some natural all-around lefties, there are options. Football gets a little tougher to justify anything, and handedness doesn't exactly matter much for basically all positions except one. Southpaw quarterbacks have famously been extremely rare in the NFL, this due to a combination of factors. For one, the ball spins the opposite way, creating a slightly different feeling for wide receivers catching it than they're used to. You'll also need to flip a decent amount of your entire offensive playbook to suit the natural strengths of a left-handed quarterback, particularly on bootlegs and quarterback rollout type of plays. Another thing that I think plays a real influence is just how unusual it is to see a lefty throwing motion, and oftentimes because you're not used to it, it doesn't look as pretty. Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, left-handed, has had multiple clips go viral in the last few years where people literally just 180-degree flip his throwing footage and watched it mirrored as if he was a righty, and it looks way more smooth because our eyes just like it more. Tua is currently just one of 2 starting left-handed quarterbacks in the league, the other being Michael Penix Jr., which is a comparatively high amount versus what the NFL has been used to. Just recently, from 2016 to 2020, a 5-year period, not a single Molly Duker started an NFL game. Elsewhere in the sport, it can be tough to even find out whether non-quarterbacks are lefties because it doesn't really matter a ton. So let me stop stalling and answer the question of what makes baseball the most valuable part of a left-handed person's existence. It's easiest to understand by laying it all out. Here is a right-handed pitcher versus a right-handed hitter. Cumulatively, across all levels of baseball that anyone can play, this is the most common plate matchup, right-on-right crime. It's important to note 2 things because of this. First, all hitters and all pitchers are going to be most accustomed to seeing righties. You're familiar with it. That's what you're more used to because naturally in your entire life, you're going to see and play against more righties than lefties. Sure, in the MLB, there's more lefties than normal, but it's still less than half, and you have to account for all the baseball you play as a kid. You grow up seeing almost only right hands. The second and key detail is breaking balls. When a right-hander throws a slider, it comes at the hitter and breaks over the plate. This is very difficult to hit, and it can often result in these disgusting-looking pitches where a player literally flinches and moves out of the way thinking they're about to get hit by the pitch, only for it to bend over the plate and into the strike zone. Thus, in a matchup of a right-handed pitcher versus right-handed hitter, the pitcher has the advantage. Of course, this is just one of 4 possible plate matchups in baseball, each of them unique in their own way. Breaking balls and the way they move against the hitter play a huge factor in all four situations. Another crucial thing to note is that left-handed hitters have an advantage built into the very field baseball is played on. The batter's box for lefties is slightly closer to first base, and that's a difference that plays a huge factor, not just helping on infield singles, but giving you that couple foot jump on extra base hits, a better chance to beat tags on doubles and triples. A lefty's swing will also naturally bring their body's momentum down the first base line and towards first, while the exact opposite is true of righties. Those three reasons pretty much lay the base of why left-handers are so important in baseball. You hit better against the opposite hand. You pitch better against the same hand. Given that most pitchers are right-handed, that makes it easy to see why left-handed hitters are so valuable. Not only are they more rare, simple supply and demand, but they hit better against most pitchers, righties. Now, the question this presents is why left-handed pitchers are so valuable. There's actually a saying in baseball that if you can throw strikes with your left hand, you will have a job forever. How can that be true when, on paper, they throw worse against most hitters, righties? A lot of it is just because of how rare they are. You can play multiple different positions or be a DH as a lefty hitter. It can be suiting to different skill sets. There's just not nearly as many left-handed pitchers. This can be seen in the Hall of Fame stat we showed earlier. Even though both numbers were higher than expected, the proportion of hitters still doubled the pitchers. I'll also throw in the fact that for a natural-born righty, it's generally considered a lot easier to learn how to swing a bat lefty than it is to learn how to pitch lefty. With that, it brings us to the final layer that exists around all of these four possible combinations and what really makes these guys valuable. It's something called platoon splits. They go a little like this. We know who is better against who. You hit better against the opposite throwing pitcher, sure. Here's where a confusing sentence is about to get typed. The advantage that a left-handed pitcher has against a left-handed hitter is bigger than the advantage a right-handed pitcher has against a right-handed hitter. Are you still with me? Because of how rare lefty pitchers are, lefty hitters are not very used to seeing them. So what should be an advantage based on the way the ball breaks is not nearly as much of one just because they don't have much experience against it. This same logic, of course, can be applied the other way. The advantage a lefty hitter has on a righty pitcher is way bigger than the righty hitter against a lefty pitcher because you're usually hitting off of them. You're used to seeing that. Familiarity is the most important word to remember here. So simply due to scarcity, them not being as common, the left-hand advantage on both sides outweighs the other one. I hope this is all able to help you really understand why these cutty whifters are so popular and weirdly common in the sport of baseball. On the practice course driving range at Arizona State University, another story continues to unfold. You could call the place a party school. You'd be dead on accurate. But Phil Mickelson had his reasoning. He didn't like the third Super Monkey upgrade path, so he became a Sun Devil. You could call it a bit of a gamble, prioritizing his athletic path over academic prowess. Years later, decades actually, much of the world would learn that Phil was a bit of an avid, and all things considered, arguably pretty damn good gambler. The guy loves to bet, and he did indeed develop a problem with it, self-admitted. Yes, obviously, he could clean you out over 18 holes of golf, but it didn't have to be there. Mickelson famously made headlines when he cashed a winning ticket of $560,000, an amount big enough to become public. In the preseason, he had put 20 grand down on the Baltimore Ravens to win the Super Bowl, and this was the 2001 NFL season. That's not the only high-profile sports win on his books. He also cashed over 5 figures on an early regular season Diamondbacks World Series bet the very same year. Of course, a gambling addiction is not a joke and should be taken seriously, treated with care. I heard them say that on ESPN. I also heard them say this message is sponsored by DraftKings. But for Phil, it extended even beyond sports. It's 2014, life is good. Who the hell is Steph Curry? And why does this headline have the words Phil Mickelson and FBI in it? During the Memorial Golf Tournament in Ohio, Phil was approached and questioned by FBI agents who were deeply investigating insider trading. We will get back here. For now, college. And for college, collage. It is debatably important to mention that Phil Mickelson just might be the greatest college golfer in the history of ever. Here's a list of everyone who has ever won 2 college golf national championships in a row as an individual. Phil joined an impressive group, though he doesn't top it, as Ben Crenshaw actually won 3 in a row, the only to ever do so. However, Phil would do something none of them did by losing his junior year championship, but coming back and winning it again his senior year, tying him with Crenshaw for the most ever at 3. His sophomore year also saw him lead Arizona to a team national championship, their first in school history. Flashing through each and every one of Phil Mickelson's college golf tournaments is next to hilarious. Out of his 51 appearances, he won 16 of them, or over 30% of all events he entered. He missed the top 10 just 8 times, and notably, I think in the cinema world they would call this foreshadowing. Phil had 12 separate runner-up finishes where he took 2nd place. That means over half of his entered tournaments, he won either gold or silver. Used to being great, sure, but also used to being one of the greatest. It's not a cardinal sin in golf to finish 2nd, though. It's usually a sign that you played good enough to win. Jack Nicklaus has the most major wins of all time, and also has the most major runner-up finishes of all time. It can sort of serve as a further mark of dominance. Even when you were off, you were barely off. I mean, some of these stretches in college were just unreal. Starting when he won his 2nd straight national championship as a sophomore and into the next season, he went first, second, third, first. All in a row. That is nauseating. And he might have burnt out with that dominant start to his junior year, because it was the one time he didn't win a natty. He did, of course, go out as a senior with 5 wins in his last 9 events, ending it on his 3rd championship. For all they have seen, ASU never has had a better golfer enrolled in class. But the school has an unexplainable force. Name a left-handed NBA player for me, just anyone who shoots lefty. According to my intricate studies of texting like 6 people this very question, odds are you said James Harden. Though, if Zach Randolph did jump to any of your minds, I love you. Okay, baseball. Let's throw steroids and debates out the window. Barry Bonds is the most dominant left-handed hitter ever, based on stats we have. And football, before you tell me I'm reaching, hear me out. Who has more sacks than anyone in Baltimore Raven history? It's not Ray Lewis. It's not Elvis Dumervil. We're talking Terrell Suggs. Now, this is football. He isn't a quarterback, so handedness doesn't play a huge part. Determining if Terrell Suggs is a lefty or righty is not that easy. Why do we even bring him up? Well, earlier this year, Terrell Suggs was arrested. The charges stem back to an incident at a Starbucks drive-thru last year. In a disagreement with another customer that quickly escalated, Terrell pulled out his show-and-tell piece for the class, which was a gun. He reportedly threatened to kill the driver of the other vehicle, and according to reports, he held that gun, wait for it, with his left hand. I tied it back. Might have taken the Cena crowd, but we ended on left hands. I'm not sure what the supernatural explanation for this would be, but all of these athletes, James Harden, Barry Bonds, Terrell Suggs, and Phil Mickelson, some of, if not the, most famous and well-known lefties in their sports history, attended Arizona State University. If any students there have some time on your hands in between not and studying, please let us know why you think this is. As soon as Philip Alfred graduated college, he turned pro in the golf scene. Scattered in midst of his collegiate tournaments were some PGA ones that he played in as an amateur. In fact, in January of 1991, a good while back, he won the North Telecom Open in Tucson, Arizona, as an amateur. It would be his first of many PGA victories to come, but despite this not being a major tournament by any means, the rarity of an amateur golfer winning any event on the PGA Tour is otherworldly, and Phil maybe did it at the hardest time he could have. Since 1945, just 8 total human beings have put themselves on this list. It's such a coveted thing that the list is already made for me. I didn't have to type the names. And don't be confused by Corey Middlecoff. The North and South Open was just the name of one tournament. He only did it once. In fact, the only guy who did it more than once was Frank Stranahan, who had maybe the coolest side gig a golfer could ever have, being a professional powerlifter. Eventually, he naturally retired from golf to run marathons. I also quickly realized that Frank Stranahan did not win 2 PGA Tour events as an amateur, he won 4. This is why I type my own lists. Gene Littler would be the most recognizable name on the list if you asked a 20-year-old Phil Mickelson in '91, but Phil's win this year sticks out. For almost 70 years, him and one other were the only amateur winners, and this table just recently came back to life, courtesy of Nick Dunlap in 2024. I really should have written my own chart. I mean, this is a mess. It isn't an Arizona State bar. Underage victories are hard to come by. But the '91 North Telecom Open, specifically, is just the most Phil Mickelson thing ever. While you were nervously testing out your fake ID, 20-year-old Phil was toe-to-toe with a 32-year-old major winner, Bob Tway, and a middle-aged man with a smooth swing named Tom Purtzer, who won his first PGA Tour event, by the way, when Phil was 5 years old, and he also graduated from ASU. We know Phil comes out on top. He'll win it by 1 stroke with an uncharacteristically clutch birdie on the 72nd hole to edge out first place. But the 2 men who tied for second, Tom and Bob, may not have been too upset. Being that Phil was an amateur, he is explicitly not allowed to collect any prize money he earns. Thus, the $180,000 set aside for the winner was split by Tom and Bob, who also got to split the second place prize, giving a pretty payday to both of them. It's also worth noting that at the time, and if not yet, then definitely after this tournament, Phil Mickelson was seen as a prodigy in the golf world. I mean, I showed you the college career. We hadn't seen the next Jack Nicklaus come along yet, and for a while, the odds-on favorite to fill that large gap would have undoubtedly been Phil. Tom and Bob were just completely blown away with what they saw by the amateur. It wasn't just the ability to go out and hit a 68 and compete with real pros, it was Phil's mental game. I don't think confidence is even the right word for what I'm describing here, though unwavering belief in his own abilities, to a fault, definitely plays a part. Phil's mentality on a golf course is always the same, though you'll see people changing their vocabulary depending on how he does. When he's winning, he's carefree out there, doing whatever he wants, stuff that no sane person would even think to try. When he's losing, he's reckless, doing whatever he wants out there, stuff that no sane person would even think to try. You see the difference? With 5 holes left to play on Sunday, Phil had a 1-stroke lead on the field. He then imploded with a triple bogey on a par 5, a snowman, to drop 3 strokes back of the lead. Phil slowly walked up and down the next 4 holes, calm, calculated, cool. Par, birdie, par. The leader stumbled. On 18, he has a birdie putt from about 8 feet to win it all. Describing it later, he'll say he went from the biggest knot in his stomach to the greatest joy on the planet, just by carefully maneuvering a long stick. It's a moment of glee. The world's supposed to be next golf star was proving everyone right. When runner-up Tom Purtzer was asked about the 20-year-old phenom, he replied, quote, "He's a kid you'd like to have as a son or a brother." Tom Purtzer has a brother. He had a 5-year-old son at the time. Phil Mickelson is damn good at the game of golf. He graduated college in June of '92. The first thing he did was enter his name as a PGA professional. His tour win last year gave him an automatic 2-year exemption, allowing him to skip qualifying school and start competing immediately. and immediately tends to be soon. That very month, June of '92, he made his professional debut in a major tournament, the US Open. A bit poetically, it was played at the Pebble Beach golf links, where his grandfather used to caddy. The career-long relationship between Phil and the US Open, widely seen as the most difficult major to win, is a compelling soap opera. After the first day of the tournament, when golf's budding superstar shot a 4-under and was tied for third in a major in his professional debut, the world was silent and watching. They then entered level 1 of the Phil Mickelson experience. Sometimes you feel like $1,000,000. Others, you flail like Phil in the rough. He shot an 81 on Friday, an almost impressive 13 shots worse than his previous day's score. He went from tied for third in the tournament to missing the cut altogether, and his US Open ended. This year's US Open happened to ride the coattails of the youngster. After his promising but quick exit, another collapse would define the tournament on the final 2 days. Gil Morgan was playing the best golf of his life. Midway through, he became the first player in US Open history to reach a score of 10 under. He was the day 1 leader by a stroke, increased it to 3 the next day, and fell back but still sat in first place on Saturday night. On Sunday, Gil would utterly fall apart. He double bogeyed 4 and 6 to fall 2 strokes back, then bogeyed 6 of his last 12 holes and did not finish in the top 12 of the field. A collapse at the US Open. It's tough to see. Philip Alford would spend the next few years aging into a 26-year-old. That is, of course, if you believe in the Gregorian calendar. If you measure in decades, he's only 2.5. He won a few PGA Tour events, at least one a year, showing some impressive consistency with his age. Nothing had changed in terms of future potential. This is the next great one. He's ramping up right now. Once he takes that first major, it's going to be dangerous. And hell, it looks like he could get a couple of them in his 20s. His most recent win, breezing by 3 strokes at the World of Golf, was his 4th in 1996, the most in any year yet. Age, ability, personality. He was not perfect, but he looked like he could be golf's perfect star. This is the next great one. 4 days later, Tiger Woods made his professional debut. The term Southpaw has debated origins. Most see it as a baseball term, while other historians trace it back to boxing. On one side, baseball diamonds are purposely built so that the batter is facing east while hitting, to minimize glare in their eyes from a setting sun. In this orientation, with some leeway, a pitcher standing and looking at home plate would have his left arm on the south side of his body. Southpaw. This chart here is actually pretty cool to look at. It's an overlay of every baseball team's stadium in the MLB and the direction it faces, with a strong and clear cutoff that not a single pro ballpark faces west. So many people have accepted this explanation and lived by it for decades. The issue with the theory is this: the oldest recorded mention of the word southpaw in baseball is not about a pitcher. It's a lefty first baseman, and the term is used to describe him in the action of hitting, not throwing. When a pitcher stands on the field, yeah, their left arm is facing south, but so is every other fielder's. It's a great baseball myth, is what it is. The story has snowballed and been accepted as fact, when in reality, southpaw has nothing to do with the pitcher. It's just a comment on handedness, and probably not even a baseball-related one. The term might have been used in a different sport before the ball and stick fellows ever got a hold of it. Claims in boxing trace back further in time, with a political cartoon using the term in 1848 to describe a fight. This has led me to believe that southpaw did in fact not originate from baseball, rather from either boxing or just a broad term for lefties before it entered the baseball lexicon. Its origins as to how it got there are tough to pin down. That's a really long time ago, but we can see if Rocky Balboa knows.
You know where Southpaw came from?
No, I don't. That's why I'm asking you, Rocky.
I'll tell you.
Thank goodness. I actually can't play the clip because YouTube would come to my home and punch me like Rocky, but he goes on to describe it as a left-handed boxer a couple hundred years ago who was fighting in Philadelphia with his good fist facing south towards New Jersey, so the crowd called him Southpaw because, and I quote, South Jersey, South Camden, Southpaw. The word is still common in boxing today, as a southpaw fighter is any who leads with his right foot and right hand in his stance, saving the left for bigger blows. The oldest ever known record of it was in 1813, a newspaper article that had nothing to do with sports. And assuming the old-timey newspaper author wasn't just inventing his own shorthand lingo as he went, which is entirely possible, I think it's safe to assume the word southpaw started out as a silly nickname for lefties, made its way into the boxing world, and then really blew up as the sport of baseball adapted it. It is a busted myth, but at this point we are so far gone that I think it's too late to get the rest of the world to realize the mistake. The Merriam-Webster dictionary definition for southpaw just says, especially a left-handed baseball player. The nickname, however we got it, has become a blanket term for lefties across and outside of all sports. While baseball undoubtedly has the most intricacies and advantages for people who are left-hand dominant, there are some weird numbers for southpaws across all sports. Basketball looks like it's the closest to the global average and it's the easiest to account for, but there's still lots of weird kinks in there. First are actual differences on the court. More often than not, a player is going to be better at driving with their dominant hand. You get to use your body and your other arm for protection from the defender, and when you pull up to shoot, you're taking the ball away from the defense as opposed to giving them a chance to swipe at it. Of course, at the highest level, this difference is negated. Players work tirelessly to make their left hand as skilled as possible, so you have the ability to go both ways and aren't just being funneled to the right side of the court. At lower levels of the sport, you see a lot of defenders forcing point guards to use their left hand. Sometimes you might even see a young boy, maybe 12, 13 years old, wide-eyed and innocent, ready to take on the basketball world. He starts funneling a guy to the left side as soon as the game starts, and it takes the poor kid getting blown by for 3 easy layups to realize, oh shit, that guy's left-handed. But yeah, once you're in the NBA, you don't really see many guys who are noticeably weaker with one hand than the other. Some stats, particularly around LeBron, suggest that many right-handers actually prefer and are better when driving to their left. LeBron in particular is actually another good example of why we see less lefties in sports. He is naturally left-handed. He does almost everything the wrong way, but as we know, he shoots a basketball righty, which he credits to watching his influences of Michael Jordan and Penny Hardaway while growing up. We talked about the NFL pretty good, and the truth is there's nothing near a concrete number for percentage in the league. Most non-quarterbacks just aren't asked about it because it doesn't matter. It can be surprisingly difficult to find out your favorite player's handedness. Hockey is the one I'm excited for. I haven't lied to you with these stats or about these sports. Baseball is lefty paradise, but you're gonna be confused. In the NHL, over 65% of players shoot with their left hand. This does not mean 65% of NHL players are left-handed. This stat is the product of 2 differing countries and 2 different sports. The biggest reason for this is that you get more control from having your right hand on top of the stick in hockey because you're holding it downwards and you have to dribble the puck. When your right hand's on top, the stick naturally goes to the left side of your body. But there is another weird reason. Allow me to generalize the hell out of 2 countries. See, Canadians make up a majority of the NHL, despite Americans slowly catching up. In America, most kids, even a lot of the eventual hockey players, grow up playing and learning baseball in their formative years. When you learn to swing a baseball bat as a righty, you put your right hand on top, rest the bat on your right shoulder, and swing away. However, when you grow up in Canada, your parents are often actually moose. You eat syrup for dessert, and you might learn hockey when you're an infant, not baseball. The ideal way to hold the stick for a natural righty is on the left side of your body. This way your right hand is the one on top. It's where you get most power behind shots, and crucially, it allows for control and handling the puck. It makes dribbling easier, which of course isn't a factor in baseball. So you have players in Canada who grow up playing hockey shooting from their left side. You also have players in America who grew up swinging baseball bats from their right side. Thus, when you put a hockey stick in an American's hands, it's going to be a much more natural feeling swing from the right side of their body, much more similar to the baseball swing. This is not an all-encompassing, perfect explanation of why these stats happen in hockey, but it is a weird factor that definitely has an impact, and I think this paints the best possible picture. So there are the 4 major sports in America and their left-hand relationships. It is a factor across many other sports. I'm sure soccer fans are upset, as they often are in Hayden videos, but footedness is kind of its own thing, and it's significantly more common to be left-footed than left-handed. They call it goofy-footed, though, discrimination. That's also used in skateboarding and surfing, snowboard, all of you. Complete down-home backwater footists. Diego Maradona got the Southpaw some love on a pitch. Well, not love, I guess more so passionate, intense hatred. A weird note is that left footers are often seen as more aesthetically pleasing in soccer. Most agree it's prettier to watch them play the game, and they do it with more grace than right footers. Other smaller sports have varying levels of difference for lefties. The quote I really like is that lefties consistently will have an advantage in sports that involve aiming at a target that is in the area of an opponent's control. These sports include baseball as well as tennis, fencing, boxing, cricket. The reasoning, as we've touched on, is that opponents are simply so used to seeing righties, the delivery throws them off because of how rare it is. But as with all things in the sports world, baseball just takes it insanely far to more degrees. We went deep into the different possible plate matchups of batter versus pitcher, and there's a lot there, but that is only 2 people on the field at once. There is a whole team of defensive positions, each with their own relationship to left-handed players. Second base, shortstop, and third base are pretty much never played by people who throw with their left hand. Like, it never happens. Some guys decades ago would do it for a couple innings as like a joke, but no, you have to throw the ball right-handed. The reason for this, with how split second based infielding is that righties have a natural advantage throwing to first base with how the field is positioned and where your momentum takes you. It's an awkward movement for a lefty that takes up an extra split second. Second base and shortstop, because of double plays and making a quick turn to throw, are even more advantageous to be righty. It naturally takes more time for lefties. So while these infielders in the pros are all using their right hand to throw, an extremely common combination in baseball is to throw right-handed and hit left-handed. These players are generally born righty and teach themselves a left-handed swing at some point. Another factor that definitely exists is that if you are a natural left-handed thrower and anywhere close to being good at it, odds are you're going to be made into a pitcher because of how sought after they are. Oddly, first base is the only other position on the field where it's better to have someone who throws lefty. This advantage, while not huge, is because your glove will naturally be closer to the rest of the infield when they're throwing to you. The MLB, however, doesn't read much into this one. There's plenty of right-handed first basemen. Catchers are completely and only right-handed. You have literally no shot if you throw lefty. This is because with most batters being right-handed, a southpaw making the throw to second to catch someone stealing becomes much more difficult. You have a large human standing in your way. There's also the issue of tagging people out at the plate. Your glove is on the opposite side, meaning you have to reach over for tags. That can cost you that split second. Righties already have their glove position to tag a sliding runner out. So what do we do with actual full-blown throwing lefties who aren't good enough to pitch? I don't think they will all fit at first base. There's a lot of them. Of course, you throw them in the outfield. There's not much pros or cons out there, no matter what hand you use. It's always nice to have a righty in right field, lefty in left, because their gloves are towards the foul line. It can make chasing down balls and reaching over the wall easier, but there's not a ton of care put into it out there. And that's it. I mean, that's baseball. That's the whole left hand of it. That's the left hand in sports across all of them. The story sort of ends. Well, that's how this one goes. Another continues, overshadowed. Tida Woods, T-I-D-A, is the mother of Tiger Woods, T-I-G-E-R, who plays the sport of golf, G-O-L-F. She used to call Phil Mickelson Fat Boy. Okay, let's go back a moment. I teased a stat about Phil earlier, but I was intentionally careful with my wording. Phil's dominance over this stretch of time, close to the exact prime of his career, is amazing. It wasn't the most amazing. If we were to number these guys, Phil would be 2. Second place, 2. The next best, Dose. Phil, the runner-up. Yeah, that has a ring to it. You can probably imagine who's ahead of him. In this stretch of time, Tiger Woods was a cumulative 134 below par in majors. He was 233 strokes better than second place, Phil. There is no understanding this stat. We will move on carefully and pretend we didn't see it. Tiger Woods starts playing golf professionally in 1996. Very quickly, he will overtake Phil as the next great thing in the sport. Here's a chart of every major Phil has competed in so far in his career through the 1997 Masters, and just how he fared each time. Still yet to get over the hump that is your first major, but once you get one, maybe they'll start flying in everywhere. Here is the same chart for Tiger Woods through the 1997 Masters. He won the Masters that year. It was his first major in his career that he entered as a professional. He had played in a few as an amateur, but quickly, Tiger burst onto the scene with his first major, almost a direct insult to Phil, taking the Masters at 21 years old, the youngest of all time. It doesn't really feel accurate to say he won the golf tournament. After a day, Tiger was sitting at 4th, 3 strokes back of John Huston's impressive Thursday. He actually started out real slow, turning the front 9 at 4 over par. He then cashed 4 birdies and an eagle to will himself back. 40 on the front 9, 30 on the back 9. Unreal. On a slower second day, Tiger began to rout the field, heading into the weekend with a 3-stroke lead. It was more classic Tiger, the golf that made him so great, than any sort of hot stretch here. He simply refused to mess up. 1 bogey, 5 birdies, and an eagle through 18 holes. Let everyone else play themselves out. Phil Mickelson had already played himself out. He just missed the cut, and his Masters ended on Friday. The first major continues to elude him. Things really got silly over the weekend. Tiger didn't bogey a hole on Saturday, continuing with never-before-seen levels of consistency. His lead stretched to 9 strokes. Sunday couldn't have been exciting to watch. The 21-year-old probably could have still won if he shot with his left hand. But people did watch. To date, the 1997 Masters are the most viewed in the tournament's history. 44 million tuned in, half the amount of that year's Super Bowl, to watch the should-be junior in college laugh every one of the best professionals off the biggest stage in the sport. He won it by 12 strokes, the largest margin ever in the Masters by a good chunk, and set the record for the course's lowest score ever at that point. On the topic of Augusta history, it's worth mentioning that 8 years before this, black people were banned from Augusta. It wasn't until 1990 that the policy was lifted. Even crazier and often forgotten is that it wasn't until 1992 that players were allowed to bring their own caddies. Before that, all caddies on the course were black, which is bewildering. The dominating win is almost a little more enjoyable when you take this into account. While he was just one of those 44 million viewers, I can't imagine it was awesome for Phil to watch. Watching someone else's story at the time he was supposed to start writing his. This orange striped fella, he cut in line. You wait your turn, you struggle for years, then you get to win majors. Screw this guy. It was 1996, and one of the most famous golf movies of all time had the brilliant idea to put actual golfers in the movie for cameos. Phil was still next big thing enough to get an invite here. On set, however, a story would come out years later that is Phil Mickelson. The man who plays every hole like it's a trick shot. He's a risk taker. He'll go all in on something stupid. Big cojones on the guy. And I'm not talking about golf anymore. It's this point where some gambling stories, ones like you or I could not fathom, begin to seep through the cracks. On set, while filming the Kevin Costner-led movie, some cast and crew were waiting around killing time. Someone made a mistake. Hey, Phil, I bet you can't stop. The mistake has been made. Phil had to hit a ball over a tree while leaning his shoulder on that very tree, and there's no video of this, but it basically sounds like a flop shot on steroids that has to go straight up in the air. People started throwing money in, mostly hundreds, and once the pot got to $1,200, Phil took his swing. The ball shot up in the air. Before it reached its climax, Phil bent over, picked up the cash, pocketed it. Then the ball soared over the tree and came down on the other side. Once upon a time, Phil was playing with a 17-year-old phenom from Australia. The kid was thinking about attending Arizona State, and the school had brought out the big guns to secure their next great golfer. The kid, Ryan Ruffles, later spilled the details on what happened during their morning of golf together. On the first tee, early in the sunrise, they'd only spoken a couple words to each other. Phil blurts out something like, "I don't get out of bed this early to play for anything less than $2,500. Phil, a seasoned pro, gave the kid 2-to-1 odds. He only has to pay $2,500 if he loses, and if he beats Phil, he wins $5,000. After 18, the kid happened to win by a stroke, and Phil paid up. However, when Ruffles broke the story to the media, and it began getting some press, Phil was not happy. He's young, and he's got some things to learn, Lefty said at a press conference. One of them is you don't discuss things. You don't discuss specifics of what you play for, and you certainly don't embellish and create a false amount just for your own embellishment. That's high school stuff." End quote. If I was a betting man, i.e. if I was Phil Mickelson, I think it's more likely that Ryan Ruffles was under-exaggerating numbers here. Al Santos, the Pebble Beach-bound grandfather of the left-handed golfer named Philip, just might have killed someone. Or multiple people, who really knows? His valiant efforts to avoid the fishing docks ended up in him leaving for San Diego and doing grunt work captaining, wait for it, a boat with his brothers, where they fished for tuna. The sea and its endless dangers was their second biggest obstacle. Their first was, well, quote-unquote, pirates were shooting at his boat, trying to steal his catch, and he shot back at them. He might have killed one of them. He didn't want to stick around and find out. Al Santos had to be Al Santos so that a couple generations later, Phil Mickelson could get the chance to be Phil Mickelson. And Al Santos was an unrelenting, work-for-everything badass. At his best, Phil could have an ounce of that in his blood, too. On his good side, on his best day, Phil Mickelson plays golf for the fans. For as many threads as you can find bashing him and his personality and his sometimes incomprehensible decision-making, there's another one loaded with fans sharing beautiful interactions with him. The PGA Tour YouTube channel does not post a 4-minute compilation of fan interactions for every single golfer. He published a book called Secrets of the Short Game that is widely seen as one of the greatest training guides in the sport. He's maybe the best and definitely the most creative golfer inside of 50 yards ever, and he gladly shares his mastery. Phil knew very well that pro golf is about more than hitting a ball into a hole in as few strokes as possible. Pro golf is about getting millions of people to watch you hit a ball into a hole in as few strokes as possible. Let me quote one random social media post I found. Someone asked, "Does anyone here actually like Phil Mickelson?" Fair question. One comment says, "He reminds me of the dickhead smartass friend that's fun to be around, but the constant yapping gets old after a few hours." Okay. Another says, "He has charisma, he's an entertainer, he's a character, and obviously one of the best players ever. There aren't people like him in golf." That has its appeal. It's a microscope of an example, but Phil has a lot of people on both sides. He is two sides of the same coin, very different sides, night and day, heads and tails, but the same coin. When Bleacher Report ranked personable golfers, they didn't title the article "The Best Guys in Golf," they titled it "Phil Mickelson" and the Top 11 Nice Guys in Golf. Go on Google or any social media and type in Phil stories, and you'll be greeted with comment sections full of hundreds of first-hand accounts. Some guys, the Tiger Woods of the world, get so locked in during tournaments, their laser focus is impressive because it's like no one is there, just them, the ball, and the flag. Phil is the opposite in a lot of ways. He's actively trying to make it a better time for the fans, to get them involved, and to get them to come back next year and watch more golf. This was maybe the most obvious difference between Tiger and Phil, the discipline. Tiger was methodical in his approach to everything. Phil lacked a lot of that. I mean, you could look at the two of them and see it. One's body was chiseled in peak athletic shape, like a guy who takes the bun off his burger. The other had a belly, liked fast food, often was seen eating it. Phil's weight had become a topic of discussion amongst people, including but not limited to Tiger Woods' mother. Another of her nicknames was thrown around in the media a decent amount by tons of people. Hefty, a play on Phil's nickname of Lefty. And speaking of professional conflict, we should mention Lefty's distaste with the people in charge of pro golf. The only pro golf league out there right now that's worth a damn. It's 1997 still. His grievances go back years and continue for more. Once, after winning a PGA Tour event, he aired some of these grievances publicly, while he debated if he should even play in the next part of the FedEx Cup after the PGA Tour had failed to meet some of his previous requests. In Shipnuck's book, he quotes one former pro who said Mickelson would consistently talk to him about how the tour should be cut to only 30 golfers, just the stars and no one else, because the guy was on the Player Advisory Council. Mickelson did this while either oblivious or not caring about the fact that the golfer he was actively pitching it to would lose his job in the proposed plan. Phil doesn't like the PGA Tour. He's gonna attack at some point. We'll see if anything else ever develops on that front. It was around this time that most started to agree Phil held the impressive yet unwanted title of the best golfer on tour who had not won a major. Not yet, at least. You can debate when exactly he took the title, but I think most would agree it was around the turn of the century. He was ranked a top 5 to 25 golfer most of the time, winning multiple events every single year except 99. Some also like to call Phil the acronym of Fig Jam, aka Fuck I'm Good, Just Ask Me. Cocky Phil is alive and well. It was February of 2001 now, still without a major, when he took the world number 2 ranking behind, of course, Tiger Woods. Tiger had been steady in his pursuit of becoming the greatest golfer of all time, taking home 4 majors in a row at one point across 2 seasons for what historians deem a Tiger Slam rather than a Grand Slam. Phil had earned his ranking, and alongside being the best without a major, was starting to look like the Heartbreak Kid. Up to 2003, Phil was still number 2, running on a couple years taking silver to Tiger. He had finished 3rd place in the Masters 4 different times. He was the runner-up in the US Open twice, and had a 2nd place and a 3rd place in the PGA Championship. Amazing levels of so closeness. And I think most would agree, especially in the sport of golf, to say at this point, It has well now become just as much of a mental thing as it is physical, if not more. In an already extremely mentally based sport, there's a golf term that exists for this: the majors monkey. The longer you go, the better you are, the closer you get, the bigger and heavier that monkey on your back gets, and the more difficult it becomes to shed it by finally winning. Phil was the ultimate trifecta of those things. It was said that the monkey had grown up into a gorilla, weighing down Phil for 12 years. Other than that, though, his top-level consistency across majors and other tournaments was second to one. But to end out the 2003 major season, Phil slumped harder than he had in a while. His still stuck, ever-present label was almost an insult at this point more than a marker. He finished the season at a career 0-42 in major play. Him and his wife had welcomed their third child. A turning point was bound to come. A career can be defined by embarrassment far easier than it can success. People like to watch others fail. Phil Mickelson won the Masters in 2004, the first major of the year. He finished second in the US Open, then third in the Open Championship, and tied for sixth at the PGA. It was a major year that would instantly cement any golfer with an all-time legacy. It cemented Phil Mickelson as exactly who we thought he could be. He'd simply fallen victim to comparison. Phil didn't take his first lead in the Masters till day 3, and he still went to bed Saturday night tied with Chris DeMarco at 6 under, 2 shots ahead of the field. But it was Ernie Els and Phil who stepped up to battle on Sunday. Ernie hit a brilliant approach on 8 and gave himself an easy putt to secure an eagle, and he took a 1-stroke lead into the clubhouse after the front 9. Right as Phil tied it up on 12, Ernie pulled another eagle out of his else to push it back. Phil kept fighting. The two traded birdies on 15 and 16 and each parred 17 to come into the final hole, all tied up. Masters Sunday, 72nd tee, and a legacy on the line. Ernie took 4 strokes on the par 4 to stay even. Phil's second shot landed on the green, though a full 18 feet from the flag. He had a tough putt to win the Masters. With a monkey hanging on his back and a tiger looming over his head, he sunk it, jumped for the skies, and hugged his caddy. The call was a stand-in for every golf fan's exact words.
Is it his time? Yes!
Philip, the lefty himself, celebrated his first major. The universe and its carelessness for timing pokes its head up. 3 months before this day, Phil's grandfather, Al Santos, had passed away at the age of 97, having gotten to see his own flesh and blood become one of the world's best golfers and just missing out on seeing him win the world's biggest tournament. Since Phil was a youngster and he looked up to that board of guys that swung a club like he does, the list of major winners had not grown much. He was just the third to ever do it. Funny enough, Mike Weir had done it also in the Masters just last year to break the long streak. Phil's win here would actually start a weird streak of its own that we'll get back to. But Phil, in 2004, had a far superior major year to Tiger Woods. I mean, it wasn't really debatable. Tiger's best finish was 9th, Phil's worst was 6th. Maybe not likelihood, but there was possibility for him to creep up and take the world #1 spot. Golf had really gotten another great rivalry. The showdowns between Phil and Tiger, ones that came before and after this, are legendary. Two of the greats love to play mental games against each other. Before the 1998 Nissan Open, the two had faced off in a routine practice match. As it often ended up with Phil, some money was put on the line. Phil won. Later that day, when Tiger got back to his locker, there were photocopies of the $100 bills he had given Phil and a note. Just wanted you to know, Benji and his friends are very happy in their new home. It put Tiger off. He didn't appreciate the attitude. He didn't like the display. He didn't love the guy. Despite mutual respect, he never really would love the guy. In that tournament, by the way, the 98 Nissan Open, I don't think it's fair to say Phil got in Tiger's head there, but Tiger would go on to lose in a playoff. The only time that ever happened in his PGA Tour career, he was 11-1, and this was the one. There were these rules, little advantages, like the Jordan rules, that Tiger would use whenever he played with Phil. Years later, they would be revealed in Shipnuck's book. First, Tiger would always rush to finish his putt before Phil, so the crowd would all be moving to the next tee while Phil was putting. Second, he would then take his sweet time lingering around the green and letting Phil walk up to the next tee box. This way, when Tiger got there a few seconds later, Phil would have to hear the crowd scream in excitement. Next, whenever Tiger was debating whether to use a driver or a 3-wood, he would always go 3-wood when playing with Phil. He loved that Phil would have to watch him hit a perfectly accurate approach, even if it wasn't super far, and then question if he should use a driver himself to make some distance up. And finally, he simply read the Southpaw's body language. If Phil was energetic, moving up and down holes quickly, Tiger would slow down and force Phil to wait on him, taking his time. The exact opposite was true. If Phil was playing slow and methodical, Tiger did what needed to be done to mess up that rhythm. The mental attacks between the two went so much further than elementary trash talk. This is psychological warfare. Tiger followed up a disappointing 2004 season with, well, arguably the second best one of his career in 2005. Win the Masters, second in the US Open, win the Open, fourth in the PGA Championship. Phil kept up as much as one could. He squeezed into the top 10 to defend his Masters title, fell off, but made the cut at both Opens, then won the PGA Championship. Tiger and Phil were 1 and 2. The rest of the world could fight for bronze. At different points, the golf universe thought each of the two of them was going to be the next Jack Nicklaus, but they forgot how important it is to have your Arnold Palmer. Phil Mickelson was the perfect second fiddle. Now he was ready to take over and have his time in the sun.
Phil likes to golf sometimes. Phil likes to golf sometimes.
There's something that in the modern era had only been done by two people, the two greatest, Tiger and Nicklaus. This is winning 3 majors in a row. Tiger, of course, famously accomplished this in the same season before adding a 4th in a row the next year for his slam. Jack peaked at 3 in a row, which he did just once. In 2006, Phil Mickelson won the Masters for the second time in 3 years. It was his 3rd career major and 2nd in a row. Tiger had now taken a 3rd and 4th back-to-back while watching Phil win. The tide was turning. With a chip on his wing and his foot on the gas, Lefty was ready to take the world #1 spot on paper and in the minds of golf fans. The 2006 US Open was at Winged Foot. It was the first major Tiger Woods would compete in after the death of his father. Family tragedy did not stop Phil Mickelson from being hot on his tail. After the second day of the tournament, Phil was tied for 7th at 3 over. Tiger Woods had missed the cut. That is not a normal sentence. It was the first time in his professional career that he had missed a cut at a major. Over a decade of dominance, with its first break in large part because of the recent death of his father. Not only could Phil get his three-peat, but he would do it while Tiger faded harder than he ever had in his career so far. This was the chance, possibly the only one ever, to bunny hop a Tiger in the woods. We can skip to what matters. Phil had a great day 3, jumped into a tie for the lead, plenty good position. Time to play. Miss Underwood has claimed that after waiting all day, it generally is Sunday night. So we'll wait till the afternoon and jump in on the back 9 that closes out the 2006 US Open. It is one of the greatest final days in golf history. Phil's a shot back of the leader, Jeff Ogilvy, who had never won a major to this point in his career. His stance near the top of the leaderboard is such a surprise that Johnny Miller, NBC's lead commentator, had already mentioned, quote, "At least now, he can tell his grandkids that he led the US Open on a Sunday." It isn't the prettiest of golf. This is the first time in over 30 years that the US Open's leaders have finished 3 days while still over par. Flashbacks to the massacre at Winged Foot ensue. On what was an ugly final day, Ogilvy played some safe and effective golf that looked like it could be enough. Compared to the rest of the field, you didn't really need to win, you just needed to not lose. Keep yourself from making that big mistake, and Ogilvy was doing just that. Phil takes his chances when he can. After 12, a birdie has him in sole possession of first place, with 3 different golfers just a stroke behind him, breathing heavily. He bogeyed his way into a 4-way tie on the very next hole. Ogilvy will finish the rest of his round tiptoeing on shards of glass with just one more bogey. He takes the lead into the clubhouse, an ugly but hard-earned 5-over for the tournament, and that might win. Many tour golfers will call Winged Foot, located in Mamaroneck, New York, the most difficult course they ever swung on. It doesn't take your money with huge water hazards or any out-of-the-ordinary natural formations. There is just simply 18 different, well-thought-out holes that exist only to challenge you. Jack Nicklaus described it as having a particularly tough opening tee shot. The thing is, every shot after that, he says, just gets harder. Phil birdied to retake the lead, and within 2 holes, everyone around him bogeyed to put him 2 strokes ahead of the field after 15 holes. 3 to go. A bogey on 16 and a par on 17 sets us up for an epic final hole. Ogilvy sits in the clubhouse at 5 over. He is 1 stroke behind Mickelson and Colin Montgomery, who are tied for the lead. Jim Furyk is tied with Ogilvy at 2nd place right now. Furyk is in a tough spot. He needs a birdie to tie for the lead. However, Mickelson and Montgomery, a birdie wins the tournament for either. A par wins the tournament for either. A bogey would suck, but it would still force a playoff with Ogilvy. It is Mickelson, Montgomery, and everyone else right now. Colin Montgomery simply fell apart all at once. He had made a brilliant 75-foot birdie putt on 17 to set himself up here. On 18, he drove well into the middle of the fairway, 172 yards from the hole, with 3 more tries to put it in. He waited and waited, giving himself all the required time to overthink the hell out of it, and took his 7-iron short into deep rough, leaving a tough chip shot. He sloppily put it on the green, where he then 3-putted for double bogey. But at the time, no one really knew how important this collapse was or would be, because Phil Mickelson was teeing off on 18 right now and probably going to win the tournament. If Colin Montgomery fell apart out of the blue, then Phil had slowly and carefully winded up his career-defining collapse. His drive on 17 was garbage. That's not conjecture. It landed so far off the fairway that it took refuge in a trash can. He somehow fought for a par out of that, as he had all day. Phil hit an almost impressive 2 out of 17 fairways so far on Sunday. He just kept saving his own ass. Teeing off on 18, his drive was once again garbage. That one was conjecture. It hit a hospitality tent this time and landed in the grass that had been walked on and stomped all day. The lie was terrible, and still, with a 2 out of now 18 fairway ratio on the day, he could par and win the US Open on one of the world's toughest courses outright. His decision to tee with a driver will be chastised for decades to come. The decision he is about to make will be even more infamous. One hole in golf is a funny thing, because it can be a little part of a big day or a microcosm of an entire life. The more you know about Phil, the more this hole right here makes sense. Something in the world doesn't want him to have it all. There's an almost captivating cruelty in someone who's been blessed by almost every possible measure out there, but still is not enough. Most today agree Phil should have laid himself up onto the fairway with his second shot and tried a tough up and down for par. The word layup disgusts Phil Mickelson. The greatest showman needs to be seen. Did these fine folks of New York pay to watch him play golf so he could lay up his way to a third consecutive major? He went 3-iron, attempting to cut the ball in a way that would almost bend space and time if successful. There were trees, but Phil could simply go over, around, through those. About 75 yards into its path, the ball solidly nailed a tree trunk. Head-on, deflected, and started coming back towards Phil. When it sat still, Phil had moved the ball a net total of about 30 yards. There was little decision to be had anymore. Phil had to go over the tree to put himself on the green and try to even save a playoff if he could. He was unable to get it on the green. He faced an unlikely chip in for par. Holing this was the only way he could get his trophy without a playoff. Going up and down would still tie him with Ogilvy and let him start a fresh hole. He needed way too much distance to pull out the coveted flop shot. Phil sent it smoking through the green. It didn't slow down at the flag, and the little white ball disappeared into the rough on the edge of the green. A double bogey on 18 to lose by a stroke. Ball game. Phil Mickelson chokes away the U.S. Open. The camera cuts to Jeff Ogilvy, watching from the clubhouse alongside his wife. You can actually watch in real time the dropping of her jaw before she realizes exactly what happened. If Phil choking was a flood, the levee had already been destroyed and it was leaking through. One more little wave may have been enough to break the dam. The 18th hole at Winged Foot Golf Club was just a tsunami that hit a man who was vulnerable to a gust of wind. He should not have been in the spot he was after 71 holes. He could have been just the third man to ever win 3 majors in a row. He would have been 3/4 of the way to his own version of the Grand Slam, a feat that was already being referred to as the potential Mickle Slam. He had a better name for it than Tiger. It would have, could have, should have been everything. It wasn't meant to be. It is the 4th time in his career that he takes 2nd place at the U.S. Open. Lefty will lose it. A large piece, maybe the entirety of his swagger, his mojo. It will take some time to get it back. This is a turning point in a Phil Mickelson story, sure, but in a golf story. This changed the sport and what it is now, its history. He finishes twice outside of the top 15 to wrap up the majors of 06. The next year, he never cracks the top 20 in any of them, missing the cut in half. On the other side of things, Tiger Woods will attempt to bounce back from missing his first ever major cut. He will do so from the end of the 2006 US Open through the first half of 2008, where Phil didn't do anything new. Tiger would play in all 8 majors. His results were a 12th place finish and 3 runner-ups. The other 4 were wins. Both the most respectful and accurate way to go about things at this point would have been to put Tiger at first in the world, give Phil 3rd place, and leave 2nd open. No one is close enough to deserve it. The 2006 US Open was a turning point. The next real good outing Phil had in a major came, 2009. Oh boy. At the US Open. He got 2nd place. From 1999 to 2009, a decade, Phil Mickelson finished 2nd place in 5 different US Opens. He never won the tournament. There is a lot more to the human aspect of the story this time. Some horribly timed tragedy overcame the Mickelson family. Shortly before the 2009 US Open, Phil's wife Amy was diagnosed with breast cancer. He then still played the tournament and got his heart broken with another 2nd place finish. Just a couple weeks later, Phil's mother received the very same diagnosis. The two closest women in the world to Phil were each struck back to back. It's the stories like these that are impossible to seamlessly weave through his career achievements. What Phil was going through at this time wasn't golf related. We can't try to understand his headspace. Me telling you that he decided to skip the Open and that he didn't play well in the PGA Championship to end the year is nothing. Those are his results, numbers on a page, and there is so much more to the story than just his numbers. That works both ways, because it makes the next moment that much more special. Fighting back against God, Phil would take the Masters for the third time, putting his name along plenty of the greats at Augusta. He breezed through with a 5-under final day that gave him a comfy 3-stroke victory at the most prestigious event in the sport. These Masters, however, were headlined by another story, one involving Phil's great rival. Even in the rare times Phil was winning on the course, Tiger had the attention off of it. But don't worry, it wasn't good attention. You could sort of mark this as the end of the peak of the rivalry between the two. Near the end of 2009, Tiger Woods would be exposed nationally for cheating on his wife. Honestly, it was less of the fact that he was unfaithful, more that the guy was the Ted Bundy of serial cheating. This was not an affair, it was a systematic, well-thought-out, carefully executed empire of deception that Tiger was orchestrating over his wife, family, and the golf world as a whole, who idolized him as perfect. It wasn't necessarily the end of his career, but it kinda was. He had won 12 majors in the last decade. He won 0 for the next 8 years. One last Masters, the fairy tale ending for a novel that was a little more psychological horror towards the end. It was probably the last hurrah for Tiger, though he hasn't technically retired yet. You could say Phil won. Tiger's the better golfer, no one will argue that, but the rivalry, it's an interesting question. Phil's career did not end here. A couple years later, the kid famous for being second place in his sport took home second place at the US Open for his 6th time in his career, a record that is more than anyone ever has, of course. But he was playing good in 2013, and he was able to nab his first ever Open championship, 75% of the way to a career Grand Slam. Just missing the goddamn US Open. There's always something out of reach. He would take home a painful 3 more second places to close out the decade across majors. No more US Open contention, though. Sort of looking like he was just playing for fun, waiting for retirement. Phil came out of nowhere and snagged his second PGA championship in 2021, 6th total major, which made him the oldest major winner in the sport's history at 50 years old. Still competing, still dominating at the top level. Still Phil. And, of course, still taking second place finishes. He was also close to extending the age record and slipping on a 4th green jacket. And for the perfect conclusion to golf's decade-defining rivalry, we got a pay-per-view matchup in 2018 of a pure 1v1 between the two legendary golfers, just 1 year after Tiger had a nationally covered DUI, and with cheating old news, I'd say Phil's reputation might have been a little higher at this point when this happened. Both, of course, past their prime, they dueled in an underwhelming anticlimactic showdown. Phil got the best of Tiger, and if you're wondering why the hell either of them did this, well, it's because Phil took home $9 million in a day. There's a classic Phil story. Jake Owen, famous country singer, was at the after party for this event where Phil was being Phil, chatting everyone up, letting them know how good it felt taking money from Tiger. Similar to much of the world, Jake Owen was unimpressed with the event he paid to see. He walked up and told Phil, "Hey, you owe me $29.99 for wasting 4 hours on the shittiest golf I've ever seen." Phil reached into his pocket, pulled out an upper middle class salary's worth of money, and ripped a $100 bill off of it. "Yeah, I won 90,000 of these yesterday. Take 100 and go fuck yourself." The question of what Phil could have been without Tiger existing is an impossible but curious one. Some say that Phil only ever finished runner-up to Tiger in one major, so he would have only gotten one more, but Again, you have to take into credit the ever-present mental aspect of the sport. If Phil was playing with the confidence of being the consensus world number 1 instead of 2, it's a different universe. It was 2014 when the headlines came out. Phil Mickelson says he is cooperating with the FBI, involving their investigation of insider trading. The next decade would give us the gift of the full story. Billy Walters has been described as the most successful sports gambler in American history, and he enters the story. He's actually been a part of it for a while, a quiet shadow in the corner of Phil Mickelson, until now. The FBI was interested in him because of a company named Dean Foods. To put it simply, all of Phil's bets were placed through Billy Walters, sports or otherwise, though Phil was mainly in the sports world. Billy Walters was in the money-making world. He got a tip from an insider, someone involved with Dean Foods, who could give knowledge to traders and help them make a ton of money. That is the textbook definition of insider trading, and it's very illegal. Billy called up Phil Mickelson, one of his most consistent and highest-paying clients of the last few decades, and asked if he wanted in. It is unlikely Phil knew the extent of what he was agreeing to. It's also unlikely that he was completely clueless. What is gambling if not a risk? Phil is a gambling addict. He is addicted to risk. It was illegal and he probably knew, but he also knew how much money he could make from it and that he should be protected on the other side if it went south, so he did it. When the FBI came knocking, Phil did cooperate. He eventually agreed to pay back all the money they thought was unfairly earned, and he did just that, wanting no issues with the FBI or SEC. He didn't get jail time, he avoided any issues, and paid back like $1 million. But this was bad. Phil always had a reputation as a gambler. He has come out and been open about working on his problem. This brought it into the limelight and put it on his legacy where it can never leave them. Years later, in 2023, his relationship with Billy Walters was uncovered to its full alleged extent. See, Billy did get jail time for the insider trading escapade with Dean Foods. He got 5 years. When COVID hit, he was taken out of the jail and got to serve the rest of his sentence at home. Then, days before leaving office in 2021, President Trump pardoned a ton of people, one of them the most famous sports gambler in American history. He only had less than a year left on his sentence. A free man, Billy Walters then wrote an autobiography. Featured in it a shocking amount was Phil Mickelson. This is where the true nature of his gambling really came to light in its full extent. Walters alleged that Phil had placed over $1 billion worth of bets over the last 30 years they had known each other. He estimated Phil had lost over $100 million of that money. The most damning accusation was that he tried to bet on a Ryder Cup that he was playing in. Walters says he instantly brought up Pete Rose and refused to take the bet. He doesn't know if Phil went and placed it elsewhere. The Ryder Cup in question, 2012, was won by Europe after a late collapse by the entire USA team, which included Mickelson losing a singles match. Though admitting to his gambling problem, he adamantly denies this allegation and swears he never hurt the integrity of the game. It was 2017 when the headlines broke. Phil and his longtime caddy of 25 years running, now stopping, parted ways. It was mutual, going in a different direction, the two of them. At least that's all we heard for a while. Until Alan Shipnuck's book. He revealed that, quote-unquote, Bones had fired Phil at the 2017 Memorial over a series of simmering grievances, including hundreds of thousands of dollars in overdue back pay. And by hundreds, he goes on to state $900,000 that Phil did not pay and only gave half of when he eventually did relent, hence this creative article title. The lefty empire, or reputation, seemed to be crumbling. If it feels like I kinda spent 90% of this video painting the Phil picture in a more positive light and then started really dumping on him here towards the end, that was intentional. It's not about how I feel towards Phil. This is kind of the trajectory his career in terms of public perception has taken. He was always a little controversial, but there weren't near the levels of current disdain for him pre-2020-ish, I would say. A lot of people liked Phil. Even if you didn't, because he's cocky and he's arrogant, you respected him. You sort of felt bad for him in a lot of ways. Always not quite there. Tiger's runner-up, the US Open runner-up, always needing something more. He was supposed to be the next great one and ended up having a front row seat to the guy who really was. That's not how people see him anymore. It's bewildering to make the comparison to Tiger after he's been exposed for nationally cheating on his wife with dozens of women and had a public DUI, but Phil's reputation is probably lower. Phil's a gambler, Tiger's a cheater. The two best golfers of a generation. There it is. Then, Phil went and found a way to piss even more people off. I'm not going to get too much into Liv Golf right now because somewhere on the long list of videos I want to make is a full Liv Golf super documentary, but I'm sort of waiting to see if the story ends before I start that. For the Spark Notes though, a rival to the PGA Tour popped up a few years ago, backed by stupid amounts of Saudi Arabian money, and started buying the best golfers in the world away. Pay the best guys an amount of money they literally can't decline, and you get them on their tour. Money usually wins. Phil Mickelson joined a Liv. He took a reported signing bonus of $200 million, being one of golf's biggest names. So there he went, onto the bad guy side. He sold out for money. This was controversy, but it wasn't Phil controversy. It was about all of golf, and Phil was involved. You could be mad at him, but you had to be mad at a lot of other golfers too. But he was more involved than most, and the extent of his working with Liv through the early stages of their league, and even being a factor in them securing other top players, was very real. As an established, already rich, already uber popular golfer, not one of the young up-and-comers, people were more upset with Phil for selling out than most. Guys like Tiger and Rory turned down much bigger reported offers out of pure loyalty to the PGA Tour. Of course, as we know, Phil had little to no dedication or love for the PGA Tour. In hindsight, if we had time to think about it before it all happened, Phil was probably the most obvious name to jump off of this ship. He'd spent his career trying to improve the professional game, and the PGA Tour often not getting his way and building up resentment. But Phil Mickelson was the first of many big names in golf to jump over. He started the trend, and he probably played an even bigger role than we know in recruiting. Just another reason for you to not like Lefty. And you know what's crazy? That might not even be the best reason. I haven't shared that one with you, because it didn't become public until the book, written by Alan Shipnuck and a major source for this video, was published. The unauthorized biography stirred up drama in the golf world when it was released. The biggest was a quote directly from Phil. I'll read it straight from the pages. It's a long quote, and of course, all credit goes to Alan Shipnuck. Phil didn't pretend to be excited about the prospect of making his professional home in Saudi Arabia, admitting the SGL was nothing more than sports washing by a brutally oppressive regime. Quoting Phil, "They're scary motherfuckers to get involved with," he said. "We know they killed Washington Post reporter and US resident Jamal Khashoggi and have a horrible record on human rights. They execute people over there for being gay. Knowing all of this, why would I even consider it? Because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape how the PGA Tour operates. They've been able to get by with manipulative, coercive, strong-arm tactics because we, the players, had no recourse. As nice a guy as Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan comes across as, unless you have leverage, he won't do what's right. And the Saudi money has finally given us that leverage. I'm not sure I even want them to succeed, but just the idea of it is allowing us to get things done with the PGA Tour. I don't think I need to point out what made people mad, but I still will. Phil basically justified himself working with people who he admits are immoral, unethical, dangerous, hateful people because he thinks it could be better for golf in the long run. I really wanted to save this until as late as I could in the video, because I think when you really have a full picture of exactly who Phil is, this makes so much sense. I really don't think anything could be more on brand for the guy, and I say that objectively, not meaning it in a good or bad way. To throw out all concerns of ethics, of what is right, of what people are gonna think about you, to not care about any of that, because you have the chance you've been waiting for to stick it to professional golf, is just Phil being Phil. I really hope I've told the story in a good enough way that you can see that. I'm not at all trying to excuse what Phil said, I'm just telling the story. But using what we've learned in the story so far, my educated opinion tells me that Phil isn't homophobic or racist, and he doesn't support the way everything is being done over there. He is just selfish, and he wants something so bad that he's willing to look past anything to get it. You have to play the man, not the cards. This is a human sworn on taking revenge against a company he detests. He will do anything. It is not a story that ends in Phil giving up. It's likely not a story that will have a happy ending.
Cast a light on history.
In 2019, years after the passing of Al Santos, Philip Alfred Mickelson had taken home his 5th win at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, which is tied for the most all-time. Only on this course does he use his grandfather's ball marker. Phil is what he is. He is an immoral, ego-filled, pitiful, confusing, second-fiddling, misunderstood, resilient, revolutionizing, inspiring, legendary golfer and man. He's complex, he's a human, as I've reiterated, and really, in all ways, he is a lefty in sports.
Oh, my pretty baby.
Thank you.
Oh, my sweetie baby. I just can't believe I'm yours. I must have done